This is Melanie Wilkinson with YorkNewsTimes.com. Well, we had the first opportunity of this year to sit down with Governor Pete Ricketts as he makes his way across the state. He specifically wanted to talk about his proposals for property tax relief, which he stressed was his #1 priority last fall when he was campaigning. And now that he's in that position, he says that that is what he's hearing most from his constituents. That is what he most wants to see happen. He says that it's time for ag producers and really all Nebraskans to feel some sort of property tax relief.
To get sustainable tax relief, whether we're going to put more money into the Property Tax Credit Relief Fund or address our tax rates, we have to control the size and scope of government. And what I mean by that is, if you look at our revenues, our tax revenues at the state, they generally grow about 5% a year on average. If we can allow our revenues to grow at 5% and then keep our expenses around 3%, this 3% solution I'm talking about, that difference between the 5% growth in revenues and keeping your expenses at 3%, that difference is tax relief. And just to contrast that, in the biennium budget we're in right now, the one that will end June 30th,
Right.
we grew expenses 6.5% and revenues only grew 5.4%. Now, you know in your own household that you can't keep growing your expenses faster than you're growing your income sustainably.
Right.
And we can't do it at the state government either, certainly not to have tax relief, so we have to flip that around. My budget recommendation reflects that. You know, my budget recommendation for the upcoming biennium was a 3.1% growth in expenses. And that's what we really need to target to have that tax relief. So for instance, ag land valuations went up almost 30% last year.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to some farmers in Sarpy County, they're looking at another 30% increase.
Yes.
So you're seeing these huge increases in ag land. And what 75 to 65 will do, especially phased in the way that I proposed over 3 years, will really help address what's already happened and slow down that big
jumps
impact
every
on
year.
ag land. Right?
I understand.
So especially if you phase it over 3 years, I would expect most counties and school districts will be able to manage that.
Sure.
Now what it will also mean is that we'll have to put an additional $30 million into the school aid formula over and above what we'd ordinarily do. I budgeted for that as well. And that would help some school districts become equalized. So what we've seen is the trend with ag land valuations going up. A lot of school districts, especially rural school districts, are becoming, well, I don't know if it's a technical term, but unequalized. They're not getting the equalization money
Right.
anymore. And this would help bring some of those school districts back over to being equalized. Now, is this a long-term solution? It really is kind of a short-term solution.
Right.
We also need to look at other sort of ideas on how we can address the more structural issues in property tax. But as you know, those things, those big ideas, take years to kind of get people to
Sure.
think about them, make sure we don't have any unintended consequences. We don't want to make mistakes where we end up having big holes in our budget gaps and so forth. So we want to make sure that we take those in a thoughtful way that bring people along and we develop a consensus around how we look at property taxes going forward.
So again, Governor Pete Ricketts is making his way across the state, talking with constituents about their concerns, but also stressing what he would like to see for the future of Nebraska. Again, this is Melanie Wilkinson with YorkNewsTimes.com.